Good evening, gentlemen. That's my Pastor Dave voice. Hey, everyone. My name is Matt Crouch. I am one of the team leaders at Resurrection Life. If you do not know me, um, this is me. This is my beautiful wife, and these are my three kids. Those are the ones that are normally running through the sanctuary pre-service. So sorry about that. Again, I'm one of the team leads within Res Life, and it is one of my true hopes that once we are past COVID-19 and this pandemic that's going on, it is my hope and my prayer that as a team that we and a community, we continue to be even stronger than we were before. I'm really encouraged by the iron sharpens iron, the activity that we have on Sunday mornings, the Women of Worth. So many good things our church is doing to keep us connected. And I'm really hopeful that, like I said, once we come out of it and we come back together again, that we will be even stronger and we'll continue to grow together. But that is something that I wanted to talk to all of us tonight about is hope. And I have a question for all of us. And you might have the quick answer, but I'm going to kind of unpack it a little bit. And the question is, what does hope look like? What does your hope look like? What does the hope of the world look like? But specifically, I want to talk about us and identifying that with us. In doing so, I want to turn to Romans 15, 1 through 4, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. Each of us should please our neighbors for their good, to build them up. For even Christ did not please himself, but as it is written, the insults of those who insult you have fallen on me. Verse 4, for everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through the endurance taught in the scriptures and the encouragement they provide, we might have hope. So let's unpack this a little bit. You've got Paul. He is obviously he's writing a letter to the Roman church, but he's never met them before. It's a younger, smaller church. It's new. They're established, but Paul has not met to them. He hasn't gone to that church before. Where other epistles he has, he opens up, my dear brothers, or he'll open up with, oh, how I've longed to see you again. Paul's never met these people before, but he's well aware of the Roman church and some of the good that they're doing. So Paul writes this letter of understanding and clarity specifically about the gospel. And this is why a lot of people, when they're reading Romans or they're prescribing Romans, they talk about the Romans road. That's because the overarching theme of the entire book of Romans is the gospel. What is the gospel? What does the gospel look like? How to explain it, and then how the gospel should flow out of us. That's pretty much the gist of where Romans specifically is. And there's a lot to unpack with that, but just so that you understand that Paul is writing to a fairly younger church, but established. But again, he's trying to solidify the understanding of the gospel to this young church. Towards the end of the book, which is where we read in Romans 15, Paul starts to summarize the gospel as far as how it should be lived out through us, through our believers. And to give you an example of that, Romans 13, Paul's talking about the church submitting to governing authority, submitting to the authority that God has placed above us, or that he's allowed to place above us. In Romans 14, Paul starts talking about the difference between weak Christians and strong Christians. And honestly, Paul's not talking about weak Christians as though weak Christians, you need to become strong. He's not. He's actually describing that there's just a difference, that some Christians are weak, and maybe that's exactly where God wants them at this time. Not that God doesn't want to grow them, but he does. But identifying what's a weak Christian and identifying the responsibility of a strong Christian. That's where Paul's starting to kind of work through that. And to give you an example, just a quick verse in Romans 14, Paul says, you then, talking about the strong Christians, why do you judge your brother and sister? Or why do you treat them with contempt? For we all stand before God's judgment seat. Excuse me. So Paul is starting to rev this up to talk about what it is for, as he identifies the difference between a weak Christian and a strong Christian. He's starting to explain what a strong Christian, and there's a difference as far as why he's going to the strong Christian and trying to identify that more than the weak Christian. And the main reason, so let's just do that together. Because before we understand where our hope lies, before we can actually unpack and really kind of reveal in our hearts, what do I truly have my hope in? I think we need to first understand, am I a weak Christian or am I a strong Christian? For a strong Christian, obviously what we need to do is spend more time in the Word. We need to worship. We need to read His Word. We need to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit. We need to be bearing good fruit, seeking wisdom from stronger people, with stronger believers within their faith. These are common practices that we know that. And so for strong Christians, it's the same thing. We have to do all those things as well too as we continue to mature. But that's our lifestyle now. We're used to that. We Christians are not used to that. This is new for them. That's not new to us anymore. But we now have expectations as strong Christians. Here are those expectations. Romans 15, verse 1. We who are strong, which I love that, by the way. We who are strong ought to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. So let's just take verse 1. Us that are strong, we ought to bear the failings of the weak. Think about that. Think about what that would look like if we as strong believers would we know about taking up our cross daily for ourselves, but doing that for others. Again, we're talking about Christians here. We're talking about seeking those that are not as strong in their faith. And I'm being convicted as I'm saying this, but reaching out to them to see what can I do to help them with their failings and not to please ourselves. So we're identifying the way we need to respond to other believers. Verse 2, each of us should please our neighbors for their good to build them up. There's a clear distinction between weak believers and neighbors. And the Greek word for neighbors, Paul's talking about the world. He's not talking about believers in this. So Paul's identified multiple people as a strong believer. What do I need to do? What is my responsibility? Well, my responsibility as a strong believer is now to see how I can carry the failings of my fellow believers, but then also to see how I can please people that don't know Christ or don't want to have anything to do with Christ, and see how I can build them up. So the reason why this is so inspiring is because we start to realize that our responsibility is so completely different, that we have brand new expectations as we start to become a more mature believer. The reason why I wanted to unpack that is now that we understand who we are as mature, if you that are watching, if you know that you believe that you're a strong Christian, I would like to re-ask you that question one more time. Now that we have hope, what does that hope look like? I'm going to unpack that within verse 4 that we've already read. Verse 4, for everything that was written in the past was written to teach us. He's talking to we who are strong, which is verse 1. He's talking to the strong believers now. For everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through endurance taught in the scriptures and the encouragement they provide, we might have hope. For us strong believers, within this context, we've identified 4 things. We have responsibilities. Our responsibilities are to serve others. Our responsibilities are to serve selflessly. And our hope is found in Christ and His scriptures. So let me ask you my original question one more time. What does your hope look like? I'm not, as a mature believer, I'm not asking you as far as what you think you are hopeful for, or if there's times in need where you're going to for hope. I'm asking you, what kind of hope do others see in you? We identified that my responsibility is not about me, 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 me. My responsibility is about others. So the question is, what does hope look like when people look at me? What do young believers see in me? Do they see the hope of Christ? What about the world? Does the world see the hope of Christ? I mean, that's a tough question that we need to ask ourselves. It's clear in verse 4 that that's what they should be seeing, but we know how to get there. It's clear within scriptures. That's how we need to do that. The people you impact, they are seeing the hope of Jesus, or they see you. And that sentence, I was in my my personal time a couple of weeks ago, and a sentence that was similar to that really struck me. I'm like, are people seeing with the way that I talk during this pandemic, where everybody now has a voice? Everybody has a voice. As I respond to the things that are happening, do they see Jesus in me? Do they see the hope of Christ living inside of me, something they can grab a hold of? They can see the gospel through the way I'm living? Or are they seeing Matt Crouch? If it's anything else but Jesus, I'm doing it wrong. One thing I want to jump into is David and Goliath. I think this is important to understand. When we look at the Old Testament, when we look at the New Testament, is understanding like, where's my place? Understanding like who I am and where Jesus is. And if you're familiar with Christophanies, Christophanies are images and inklings of Jesus within Old Testament stories, or as far as the life of so and so. That's Jesus. The life of this person over here, well, that's really pointing you to Jesus. When you start reading like the bloodlines, I mean, those are important as well too, to always point you back to Jesus. And David is one of those people. King David is clearly one of the top people that theologians and pastors will go to say, King David is a Christophany, where his not just his lineage, but who he was. He's a foretelling of the king that is to come. But for some reason, when it comes to David and Goliath, we skip that. And I think it's dangerous, because today, because we have this voice that we just want to preach to the nations, I believe that with social media and different things, we have created this idea of, I'm the superhero. Matt Crouch is the superhero. I'm the one with the voice. I'm the one that needs to tell people how I feel. I'm the one with the message of truth. I'm the one that is saying, this is what's true, this is what's not. Follow me, follow what I'm saying, follow my comments, follow my posts, follow the things that I'm doing. Because I think that I am David and I'm the one that's conquering this thing. I'm not David. Jesus is David. I am David's brother. I'm the army that when I saw sin, when I saw this thing, I ran. I fled from it. I saw sin. I ran from glory. I ran from what was good. I ran from what was right. And so in that, Jesus came, took the place of me, and conquered that for me, because I could not do it on my own. I did not want to do it on my own. That's the message of the gospel, that it's not me that's going to conquer this big thing in front of me. It's Jesus. Now, how is it that I can reflect that and emulate that through my life? And that's the message that people need to hear now. It's where do we find our hope? Is our hope truly in the saving grace of Jesus Christ? Or is my hope in a vaccine? Or is my hope in less government? Those are things that will not matter. The average age within Jesus' time, I believe, was like mid-40s, or maybe even younger than that. That wasn't a concern. I'm not saying it wasn't a concern, but that wasn't the concern in the Gospels. It was all about the message of Christ. So they weren't talking about a vaccine. In regards to government, Jesus said, or Paul's explaining in Romans 13, how God allowed that authority to be there. Don't worry about it. I got this under control. You're a mature, strong believer. These are the things that I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on me, my goodness. And what will that produce? That will produce you being sacrificial for those weak Christians. That will produce you being sacrificial and loving and taking care of your neighbor. Because our focus is not being this person where I'm the one that I have everything right. And I'm speaking to myself so clearly right now because I can be that guy. I can be that annoying guy where I feel like this is what's right. This is what I'm going to chase. This is what I know is true. I'm not saying that's all bad because it's not. But is that rooted and grounded in our love and sacrificial walk within Christ? If it's not, then it's wrong. If it's not, and we consistently choose our own way, we're a weak Christian. And we need to be careful and conscious of where we are in our walk, especially because we're leading people. When Paul's talking about these strong believers in here, he's not asking, can you or should you lead people? You just are. Those who are strong ought to bear. There's an action. This is who you are. This is what you're going to do. And that's the call of the church. That's the call of us strong believers to do that. If you're a weak Christian, that's not where you are right now. You need to be focusing on spending time with God. Get with other men, other women that you look up to, that are spending time with Him, that's going to God, that has that godly wisdom for you. Right now, I'm talking to us that have been saturated with the gospel for a very, very long time, and the way that we act and respond to those that we know that are following us and to the world, so that we understand that there's a clear message that we're giving them, and that message 100% needs to be about Jesus. And wrapping, I just want to say two more things. It's who or what are you putting your hope in? And two, is that visible to the world? And I pray it is for you. I pray it is for myself. And I'll close with this verse, which is the next verse after Romans 1-4. It's just Romans 15:5. That says, may the God who gives endurance and encouragement. God is giving us that endurance and encouragement. We're not creating that again. Again, it's not the superhero. God gave that to us. May the God who gives endurance and encouragement give you the same attitude of mind towards each other, so that Jesus Christ had. That He gives you the same attitude of mind toward each other that Jesus Christ had. Jesus wants us all to be united. He wants us to emulate Him, and we can. Sometimes it's hard. I struggle with it all the time. So I hope that this word was a word of encouragement to kind of help get you back on understanding, identifying where we are. So I know I put my hope in this. This is where I find my hope in, and I go after that strong, and I keep doing that. And I don't have to worry if someone sees me or someone's following me to see what is it that they think that I believe, or where is it that I'm putting my hope in, because that's the only thing that's going to save us. It's the only thing that's going to restore our souls, is the message of the gospel, which is exactly what we all need to hear. So I pray that was a encouraging word. It was for me, very convicting for myself. Love you guys. Can't wait to see you, and God bless.